In a lush, green meadow surrounded by tall trees and blooming flowers lived a turtle named Toby and a rabbit named Ruby. Despite their differences in speed, Toby and Ruby were the best of friends. They loved spending their days together, drawing pictures of the colorful meadow and challenging each other with tricky puzzle games. One sunny afternoon, as they were putting the final pieces of a puzzle together, Ruby suddenly looked at Toby with a teasing grin. "You know, Toby," she said mischievously, "you're so slow at everything we do. Sometimes I feel like I'm waiting forever for you." Toby blinked slowly, his wise old eyes reflecting the wisdom he had gained from years of observing the world around him. "Oh, Ruby," he replied gently, "there's wisdom in taking your time. Patience often leads to better results than rushing through things." But Ruby shook her head, her ears twitching with impatience. "No, Toby," she insisted, "it's your slow ways that are holding us back. I think you're just afraid of trying something new." Toby sighed softly but said nothing more. He knew that sometimes his friend's quickness led her to speak before thinking. Instead of arguing, Toby simply nodded and proposed a friendly challenge to settle their disagreement. "I challenge you to a race, Ruby," Toby announced, his voice steady and sure. "Let's see who can reach the old oak tree at the edge of the meadow first. If I win, will you believe in the power of patience?" Ruby chuckled at the idea. "A race, Toby? Against me? That's like asking a snail to outrun the wind." Toby smiled quietly. He knew that Ruby liked to boast about her speed, but he was determined to show her that sometimes slow and steady wins the race. The next morning, with the sun just beginning to rise, Toby and Ruby lined up at the starting line. The meadow was alive with the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves as they waited for the signal to begin. "Ready, set, go," called out a nearby butterfly, fluttering its wings excitedly. Ruby dashed off like a streak of lightning, her long legs propelling her swiftly across the meadow. She glanced back over her shoulder and saw Toby plodding along steadily behind her, his shell glinting in the sunlight. Confident in her speed, Ruby decided to take a break halfway to the oak tree. She hopped onto a soft patch of grass and began nibbling on a clover leaf, chuckling to herself at the thought of how far ahead she must be. Meanwhile, Toby continued to inch forward, his determination unwavering. He didn't stop to rest or to admire the scenery. Instead, he focused on each step, knowing that every slow and steady movement brought him closer to his goal. As the sun reached its peak in the sky, Ruby suddenly realized that she couldn't see Toby anywhere behind her. Curious, she glanced around and gasped in surprise to see Toby just a few yards away from the old oak tree, nearing the finish line. With a burst of energy, Ruby sprinted towards the oak tree, but it was too late. Toby crossed the finish line first, his steady pace proving victorious over Ruby's haste. Breathing heavily, Ruby approached Toby with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "How did you do it, Toby?" she asked, her ears drooping slightly. Toby smiled kindly at his friend. "Patience, Ruby," he replied softly. "Patience and perseverance. Sometimes the slow and steady approach is the surest path to success." Ruby nodded thoughtfully, realizing the wisdom in Toby's words. From that day on, she learned to appreciate Toby's patient nature and understood that there was a time for speed and a time for taking things slow.